the debut full length, the album is finally on the horizon. It's out June 5th. It is actually out on my birthday, which is it's so exciting for me. Splinters from an Ever-Changing Mind. I listened to this record like 4 or 5 times so far, all the way through, and I am exhausted after listening. It's so intense, man. It's so heavy, and it's actually heavier than a lot of the material that you do in your other bands, and Misery Signals, and that you did with Shai Hulud. It's a little bit heavier than you're used to playing as well. But we'll get to that in a little bit. But to have the debut full length coming out 3 years after the EP, I mean, how do you guys feel looking back on this record, and how do you feel about how it turned out?
I mean, I'm very excited with how it turned out, and I think I agree that we set our sights on trying to do something that was more aggressive, that was heavier and more intense than the previous album, because when we got the band, when we started the band, we were kind of feeling our way out and like what we wanted to do. And when we did the first EP, we realized through playing shows for it and everything that the stuff that was the most intense, the most challenging, was what was the most rewarding. That made it, like you said, like you had mentioned, made it different from our other projects. It's what made the appeal of this project. So we decided, going on this full length, to double down on that. And one of the things that helped with it greatly was having the new drummer. Andrew, who played on the first record, is a phenomenal drummer, but he's such a groove-oriented drummer. And when it came time to do the full length, he had departed to go on and play with a pop gig, a very cool job that he got.
Nice.
And for us, we got Billy Reimer from Dillinger Escape Plan, and his feel is so intense, and everything that he had, all the knowledge that he had learned from playing in Dillinger Escape Plan for like a decade, definitely inspired me and Will to be like, okay, we can go even further with this. We can have this stuff be faster. We can have it be more intense. We can lean into these techniques of the kind of blast beats and different things like that, even more so than we did on the previous record. So we set out to try to write a more violent and intense, captivating record. And I'm really happy to hear that translates to, your listening experience with it.
Yeah, man. I mean, and going to what we talked about, or what you just touched on, is, it really opened the doors and really opened the floodgates to go down a lot heavier and more aggressive avenue than you're used to. I mean, when you're in a full-time band that's been established, like Misery Signals and Counterparts and Fit and all of these other bands, I mean, you have a specific really style and sound that fans come to expect and get used to, and it can be really hard to kind of expand that to a degree. But it's got to be fun and kind of refreshing to have this other outlet, and just kind of, there's no boundaries because it's so new. I feel like with this, that you can really, because when you're in a band that's a little bit, it's heavy but more melodically heavy, it doesn't mean you can't play the heavier stuff. So it's more fun when you get to experiment with that a little bit.
Absolutely. I think you touched upon something that's very, very true there. When you play in a band that becomes, even in its own small way, more of like a legacy band like Misery Signals or Shai Hulud that has a built-in fan base, both of those bands, the time I played with them, they had already established their sound and their fan base. And when you work in a band like that, you try to write music that honors their previous records and takes it a little further in some directions, but you still want to keep a line. You still want the band to sound like Misery Signals or something like that. With End, we were starting with a fresh slate, so it could sound like anything we wanted to. And for most of us who had been in a number of bands, who had a number of records, that was really exciting. That was actually one of the most fun attributes of the band, was to have the fresh slate, that we could do something that combine multiple things that we listened to that we weren't able to necessarily draw upon for our other bands. Like, we're able to pull elements from black metal and from grindcore and from crust punk and 90s hardcore and things like this that might not fit into our other projects. And I think you really nailed it with that. I think that is one of the most exciting things for us. The fresh slate with no expectations, because it does sound different. And, with Brendan, he's able to use a voice with ends that he doesn't use with counterparts. And he goes into it kind of every now and then. But even for me, when we were starting the band, and I remember Will gave me a call, and he's like, hey, man, I think Brendan from Counterparts should be the singer for this project. Even for me, I was like, oh, can he do heavy stuff like that? I didn't even know. And he was like, oh, he can definitely do it. Trust me on it. And I was like, absolutely, man. And as soon as I heard him, I was like, this is perfect. This is exactly what we were aiming for. But even for me, who had known him and very familiar with Counterparts, had no idea. So that fresh slate allowed us to try things that are different across the board. And it's really fun because as a musician, you listen to, most people that listen to music or play or appreciate it, you listen to multiple styles and multiple genres and multiple things like that. Everybody pulls from different, avenues, and you often can't necessarily, it's a challenge to make certain things that you listen to work. I like a lot of death metal and black metal and things like that, and I can pull little pieces of that for something like Misery Signals, but with End, we're able to pull different facets of that, like having blast beats and leaning into something like that, which is a very exciting thing. So you really nailed it with that.
Appreciate that. And you guys have done 2 videos so far, I believe. Pariah, Covet Not. The video for Pariah especially is as intense as it's going to get. I feel like it really captures the energy of the song in a lot of ways, but it's also a very very cool video. It really tells a story. And can you tell me a little bit about, for people that haven't watched that video, really what you were trying to convey and story you were trying to tell with that video to connect with the song?
Yes, absolutely. So that song, in that video is basically a small sampling of what the entire record connects. There's multiple points throughout the album that connect with different little samples that are actually clips from different, like, public domain released tapes of people being interviewed for, like, medical procedures, specifically mental health related medical procedures from the 50s and 60s. And the general idea, which, unfortunately seems more relevant today than even when we were, even the 6 months ago, when we were finishing the mix, is that it deals a lot with this kind of like feeling an unease and kind of, a bit of isolated despair, and trying to seek different things to help deal with that, and trying different avenues that our culture or society have kind of deemed like, oh, if you're struggling with this, try this, or if you're struggling with this, try this. And how every person is a different, every person is different, and not only those, prescribed ways to go about trying to heal or grow are going to actually be of use to you. And with Pariah, the video, the main character is talking to somebody that is basically like a therapist, psychiatrist, and we kind of portray him as more or less he kind of stands, there's like a little bit of a religious overtone, a little bit of like a governmental authoritative overtone, and then there's like the kind of medical overtone and different things like this. and our character is talking to him and trying to tell him these different things, but then he is haunted by something in his past or this vision of his future necessarily, and there's like a people don't necessarily pick up on this, but there's a dark mirror image of him that's kind of chasing him throughout it too. There's a masked figure that is in the same clothing and supposed to be this dark mirror image of him that's kind of chasing him through. It's almost like chasing him through what he's saying and the things that he's recalling, but then chasing him in real life through the woods and all this, and the therapy room becomes the woods and all that. And it's just basically, it trying to just create this feeling of this unease, of this trying to seek help when you feel helpless and still feeling helpless even when you're going through the channels that are available to you. So, it touches upon that, and that, again, ties into a lot of what the record deals with.
Yeah, and I kind of interpreted it the same way, but I also took it as, he's running from his own demons, his mental health demons, the stuff that he has inside that he can't really escape, but he has to dig down to get past it. It's always there, always behind him, always looming over, following him. And at the end, I feel like he's kind of like trying to bury it and get away and get rid of it forever. And it's just kind of, tells that story.
You're exactly right with that. And if you notice, it's only revealed quickly in the video, but he's digging up something. And when he digs it up, it's himself, and he is the darker image of it. It's kind of it ties into that exact thing where he's trying to outrun his own demons, and in doing that he is also kind of becoming his own demon. And then the video for Covet Not takes a completely different direction. It's just as intense, and it kind of does the same thing energy-wise, but it's also a lot more stripped down, a lot more basic. It's you guys performing the song, but it's very flashes and just dark. And was that something you guys kind of wanted to do to kind of contrast the video you guys had already done and do something different and just kind of do something a little bit more basic? Or what were you guys wanting to do with that one? Yeah, we so for both videos have the same director.
Okay.
And we did that on purpose, and we actually shot them in like a couple days in a row of each other. And we did both things together because we wanted them to maintain a little bit of a similar aesthetic and feel, but yes, be different facets. One story based, and the other one, I think with End, there's a really important element where it is raw and organic, and so we wanted a video that is the band playing. It's just raw and visceral, and is not dressed up with story and all these different things. I think one of the most important things for us with doing End that is different from our other projects is focusing on this raw, violent intensity. And there's something about having the guys together just playing. I mean, we shot that video. We did multiple performances over the course of an entire day, and we ourselves were sore and bleeding and bruised and like really hurt. And that's the thing that it's hard to tell when you're just watching a video, but when you shoot that and you're just going all out and doing it, you're all out for hours and hours, at the end of the day, you're exhausted, and you're like, we're cut our hands, everything, and you're playing in a dark and dirty environment. We actually played in, that was the same, it's like a filming location in New Jersey that has, a couple warehouses and a couple different sets together, and it's actually the same location spot that we also did the two videos for the previous record.
Okay.
So Necessary Death and Love Let Me Die. It's a different room or different part of a room than those were, and shot different, but there's like a continuity thread there too, where we wanted to keep everything in this grim, gritty environment that we had established on the first record while still expanding out to do a video like Pariah as well.
Right. That's awesome. I mean, and if you're using the same director for one video that you are another, it makes sense to, I mean, knock all of it out and kind of edit later and just do it all together and then, figure it out later, because that can be tough to schedule-wise to make that work if you have to bring them back.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges of doing and as well is that we are all spread out. We're all in different states, really. So, in doing that, it's always a special thing when we can get together. When everybody's schedule lines up, we can get together, and we try to make the most of it in terms of recording or playing shows or doing videos, like doing those in a few days, and then even when we did the 2 videos for the previous EP, we had shot both those videos on the same day. So we really tried to maximize our time. So it made sense to do it, and the director, Eric Richter, he did a fantastic job on Covet, not in Pariah.
Yeah,
so.
and I was going to ask about that. I mean, with so many different bands, I mean, there's so many things that fans don't think about when it comes to band members from different bands coming together. And I feel like one is album cycle schedules is everybody can be on such different schedules. It just takes one band out of all of them to release a record at a different time, and it can throw everything off for a very long time for everything else. How do you guys balance that and schedule that? I mean, with technology now, it's a little bit easier as far as recording music and stuff like that, and demoing and sending stuff back and forth, but I'd assume there's still a lot of obstacles that can come with that, with everybody being actively in other bands, like year-round.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody stays extremely busy in this project with all sorts of other things, as well as on top of me and the other guitarist, Will, we're both record producers, too. So we're always working in the studio, and that in itself is a very demanding job in terms of the hours. It's just a very time-consuming job. So between that and then Counterparts is one of the hardest working bands in the scene.
Huge.
They're constantly on tour.
Yeah.
And Billy is such a fantastic drummer. He is always getting hired out to do different things and to play in different bands. So it is a very challenging thing. And basically what we have to do is we have to plan things out very far ahead. We have to plan things out, 4, 5, 6 months ahead. Even with our album coming out June 5th, we had written and tracked most of the records almost a couple of years ago now, like a year and a half ago. So we sat on it, we finished the record, and we sat on it, and then finished the mix and everything over the course of a year.
Wow.
And that was to line up all of our schedules to have the release come out at a time that made sense, because there was a fit for an Autopsy record.
Yep.
There was a Counterparts record, and even balancing, even though I don't officially play in Misery Signal still, I'm still involved in that fold, and I had produced their new record and things like that. So there's all these things that we had to get to line up to do this. So we just have to plan way out in advance. And that is a thing that a lot of people don't think about, because we'll post like, hey, we're doing these like 2 weeks of shows, and people will be like, what the hell, no date here, no date here. And it's kind of like, okay, well, we can only be together for this many days, and we're going to try to play, as far spread out and as much as we can for those few days or few weeks.
Right.
And we don't have, because we live so far apart, we don't have conventional rehearsal either. So we get together a couple days before a tour, and then we just play all day, multiple days in a row, like long, 10, 12, 14-hour sessions or whatever, and then we're good to go for the shows. So it's pretty hectic. So you fly in or you drive in or whatever, immediately at practice, and then you're immediately gone. Like, okay, tour's over, somebody's not bringing to the airport, you got to go fly and meet up with this other tour.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and when fans are like, well, no, how come it's only like 2 weeks or it's only like a week? And it's like, well, we could do more, but if we do more, well, you're going to lose some counterparts time. You're not going to have a fit for an autopsy tour, or you're going to lose dates for this band and this band. So it's like, nobody, it's almost impossible to balance it completely. You just can't, you know?
Yeah, you can't, and I love, I'm very fortunate and thankful to play and the projects that I've played in and to the studio. You know, I'm very thankful for it. So I don't want to sound like I'm ever complaining about that, but it does, all of this stuff in doing the studio does take up a lot of time, and especially, you know, having Will be one of my best friends and watching how he works. He's one of the hardest working people I've ever met in my life. There's no downtime for him, and he's going, you know, 100 hours a week every week. You know, so it's like, to do this and to be fortunate enough to do something that you love, the trade-off is you really got to work at it. You know, you really got to put your all into it, and so that translates to all the avenues of our life, and that also translates to doing a project like this. Like, I love, and I have so much fun touring and playing with them, and I would go out and play 200 shows a year, and, you know, but with everything that we're trying to do, because we like so many things and we appreciate doing so many things, it is a whole bunch of kind of checks and balances to, you know, what you invest your time into.
Was it supposed to be a long-term project when you guys started it way back when? I mean, or was it more of, hey guys, let's get together and jam and see what happens and see how it goes, and then it's like, this is going really well, this is awesome, let's record some music?
I definitely think it took it took on a life of its own that none of us were anticipating. We definitely got together and we're kind of like, okay, well, let's put these songs together. These are cool. Like, I really like these. This sounds like these bands that I listen to. I love this. And then when we put out the record and we started playing shows, we were kind of like, fuck, this is actually really fulfilling and this is really exciting. And how well, I think the thing that was the most surprising to some extent was how well we all got along too. Because going into doing the first EP, Will was kind of the person who had given everybody a call and was like, I want to do a project like this. Like, me and him had talked about doing something heavy like this years ago. But other than Will, I didn't really know the other guys in the band until we were in the studio doing the first record. So I had kind of met those guys. You know, I met them in passing, but I didn't really know them. And then the chemistry of everybody and everybody hanging out was so fun that it kind of took a life of its own, and people seemed to respond to the music. They're very thankful for it. We were kind of like, oh wow, like, I guess kids listen to this kind of stuff. Like, this is cool. So it was, you know, kind of surprising to us, and in the best way possible. And it definitely, took a life of its own. I think we started it just without any expectations at all. Like, we could tour, we could just make the record and never play a show, or very infrequently play a show, like, you know, so many bands, you know, like composites of other bands do, where they're like, here's an album, and we play 3 shows or something.
Yeah.
We kind of just went in with no expectations either way, and the more we do with this band, the more fulfilling and the more we feel the call to do additional stuff. So it keeps snowballing, and not even just like in terms of response, which we're very thankful for, but even in terms of our own internal chemistry. Like, man, I really love playing music with David Pito. I really love playing music with Will Putney. I love working on the production with a guy like this and doing all this. So it's like, it's kind of snowballed just internally too, where we really enjoy what we're doing, and we really have been feeling like a connection with each other. And I think some of that chemistry and stuff has translated into the new record, and I think the new record is more so the contribution of everybody really putting in and having their own flair added in, even more so than the first record. And it's a really exciting path to be on.
Yeah, and it is really cool to see it is received as well as it has been, because us metalheads can be very, sometimes it gets closed-minded when it comes to new stuff. We don't always, when it comes to combining styles, and sometimes we're either all for it or a lot of times don't necessarily want to give it a chance. And so when fans really, really love the material as much as they have been, it's got to be validating, because when you like it as much as you do and the fans, we like it as much as we do, it's a beautiful thing when we all kind of come together that way.
Absolutely. We're very thankful for that.
Yeah.
It was not expected. We really didn't think, we weren't sure how it was going to go over at all. And the stuff that we're pulling from, I've played in a number of bands over the years, but my first band, like one of the first bands I ever did, the first band I ever released any music through, was like a grindcore kind of crust punk violent band in the mid '90s.
Wow.
Around like 96, 97.
Nice.
And that was the stuff that I had really gotten into and have touched upon with different projects throughout the years, but it was never a thing that, at least in the circle of people that I would play music with, that really people got or appreciated. So, I've played in a number of bands, but I didn't necessarily always draw from that, but that is where I started. So, like, with what End is doing, when people say, oh, you guys sound like this band or this band or this band, it really is like, oh, well, we actually, I grew up listening to these bands in the 90s, and I've been wanting to play stuff like this for over 20 years, and now I am doing it, and I think people that might be, semi-lit counterparts or something like that, they might not know some of the bands that we pull from. They might not know His Heroes Gone, or Emperor, or Decapitated, or some of these bands that we take influence from. And so it's really cool to kind of provide, some kind of, hopefully, like, open some people's palates up. And then obviously there's people that hear it that know exactly what we're going for, or, hearing that too. But it is cool to put these things together and to have people take away different stuff. I see people compare us to a very wide range of things. I've had some of my friends take me up and be like, you guys sound like Turmoil, and then other friends be like, oh, this is very His Heroes Gone. And I'll see kids online that'll be like, this sounds like Norma Jean, or this sounds like a Cherry, or something like that. And so people take a lot of different things from it. Yeah. And I think that's because it's just a combination of a lot of different influences. You kind of, depending on how you go into it, your own, how you got there, your own perspective is going to dictate how you view it. So it's cool that people are responding to it. Like I said, we weren't sure. Right. But we're very thankful for it.
So how do you guys feel about the title of supergroup or stuff like that? I mean, because anytime bands come together collectively from different groups, it's either called side projects, supergroups, stuff like that. I mean, some bands are cool with it. Some bands are like, it's not a supergroup. It's just another band that we're in. I mean, how do you guys feel about that whole thing?
Well, I think with supergroup, with that term in particular, we kind of laugh at it because we're all like extremely normal people that don't feel like we're thankful to make music, but we don't feel like we've had any sort of success to be a super character. We're still scraping by and doing things like that. So whenever that term is brought up, or I guess like even side projects or something like that, we don't use that term ourselves. So if somebody else is like, this is a super group of these guys or something like this, we kind of laugh at it and we're like, oh, that's cool, but we don't view it that way at all. It's just kind of people getting together that like, we all like similar bands that are going into this, and we all we really just connect on that front. And so to us, it's just a band that we're playing. And you know, for Brendan, the Counterparts, this is his second band ever. He was only in Counterparts. He never did like those like bands when you're in high school where you're still figuring it out.
Oh wow!
You get together with your friends. Counterparts is his first band that he ever did.
Wow.
And is just his second band. So
he got lucky.
Yeah. It's such a funny thing. Because usually, you know, for most people, you have kind of the trial and error band.
Yeah.
You're figuring it out.
Yeah.
So I don't think for him, it's not like, oh, I'm doing some supergroup thing. It's like, this is my second band, and I'm doing something else.
Yeah.
So it's as simple as that. And for us, we don't view it as like this guy from this. I mean, it's fun to talk about it because, truthfully, I'm a fan of a lot of the work of the guys that are in this band. So when I talk about somebody, I'm like, oh, I cannot believe I'm able to play music with the guy from Dillinger Escape Plan.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Like, for me, I'm very excited about that. But I realize at the same time, when it comes to describing the band, it's just like, oh, we're just guys that are lucky enough to have found one another to make music together.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem like it's too, you know, supergroup seems like a fantastical term. We're just like hardcore kids that,
right.
you know, grew up on X record. You know, we like this Converge record. Okay, cool. Let's play something like that. So.
Right. Supergroup I see more is like if like members of like Motley Crue, Def Leppard, and Poison all came together and formed a different band. That would be a supergroup. They're all huge, you know, household. I mean, supergroup I feel like gets overused so many times because
Absolutely.
it's all about titles now, and we don't need titles on anything. You don't hear people say that Pussifer, Tool, and Perfect Circle are all supergroups or even side projects. You know, they're just Maynard's other band, and Stone Sour is Corey Taylor's other band. We don't need those supergroup titles. It's stupid. You know, fans don't call it that.
Exactly. It's kind of a silly thing. It helps people market stuff, but it's not something that we've ever willingly encouraged or, you know, put down ourselves. And I do think in some of the stuff that you mentioned there, you know, like Perfect Circle, who did have people from all sorts of other bands come into it, I think what sets it apart is just constantly doing your own thing. And trying to rely on the music of that, and just sticking around for a little bit. So I think doing the EP and then doing the full length, and if we do, you know, another full length or split or something like that, as we stick around, the subject of discussion will be less like it's these guys from these bands, and it'll just be here's a new thing from this band.
Exactly.
And that's what we're trying to just like really commit to and do. I mean, we have such a great time making this record that I'm already feeling like I want to write more music and write the next thing. So
right.
I think in just kind of doing that, any kind of term like that will hopefully just kind of fall to the wayside, and it'll be taken on its own merits and not conceptions, you know, of because it works both ways. It works positively when you're like, I'm a fan of this band and this band. But it also works negatively where you're like, oh, it's like metalcore kids, like something that's like a Napalm Death fan or something. It's like, I don't care about Misery Signals or Counterparts. This probably isn't for me. But really, it's like, oh, if you like Napalm Death, you might actually like this. You know, or something like that. Because we all point from these different influences. So I hope as, you know, it kind of continues that more people can discover it that are outside of our normal sphere of influence.
Well, and what's the point of doing something in End that you guys did in Counterparts or Fit for an Autopsy or Misery Signals? I mean, that's not it would be pointless to do another band. This is also a way of fans who find End are like, oh, well, dude, he can play that. Well, maybe I'll go check out this other band that I didn't know that they were in before, and can bring fans from End to Misery Signals or other bands, or fans from Misery Signals to End and stuff. It can go both ways as well. So it's a very interesting, very cool thing when stuff like this happens, and when it's received as well as it has. But yeah, man, dude, thank you so. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to me, Greg. I mean, the record is awesome. I love it, and can't wait for it to come out so the world can hear it. It's gonna be the best birthday ever. And
I really appreciate that. You're one of the first people to hear it, right? Because we haven't had a lot of people hear it. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and
definitely
with everything going on to want to talk to us and reach out about this stuff. And I appreciate the kind words. I'm really happy that you enjoy the record. Like I said, you're one of the first people to give any kind of feedback on the record, so the fact that you like it means a lot. It's really cool. It's always a nerve-wracking thing when you're releasing something, because you put a lot of work into it, and you can't view it objectively, so you just kind of put it out there and cross your fingers.